In the following scenes, we see bodies swerving in immediate, almost unthinking response to humor, sexual desire, music, and encouragement. In the scene where Gaz and Dave dash to the car, they swerve away from wage labor. In the next scene, Lomper and Guy swerve away from heterosexual masculinity and toward homosexual desire. And in the third and fourth scenes, there are swerves toward what might be called embodied communality. Communality. There are swerves toward what might be called embodied communality. These swerves prompted us to think about non-capitalist class relations in a postmodern politics of class. As steelworkers, the men were subjected to capitalist exploitation. They were paid a wage, and their surplus labor, over and above what was necessary for subsistence, was appropriated as surplus value by the capitalists, the board of directors of the steel-producing firm. This wealth belonged to the board to distribute as they saw fit, perhaps to shareholders as dividends, perhaps to managers as bonuses, perhaps to purchase firms and other industries and drain investment away from steel. Despite their exploitation, understood and resentfully accepted, as wage earners, the men had experienced an imaginary economic completeness, an apparent self-sufficiency and independence from society at large. But their situation has now been reversed. In the line at the unemployment office, they are positioned as insufficient and dependent individuals, their subsistence needs being met by the state. While their newly experienced incompleteness is a condition of community, it is one that has not yet taken a positive form. But as the men's shoulders start to swivel and their hips begin to thrust in time with the music, we see a shared bodily pleasure in group play and performance that begins to overcome their individuation as bodies in crisis over masculinity and employment. And as the performance takes shape and takes hold in their minds, we see their growing recognition that by working together they have more earning capacity as well as direct control over the economic sources generated by the group. This is presented as fantasy rather than as business plan, though not fantasy in the sense of illusion. We see acceptance of a fluid hierarchy as leadership roles circulate around the group, from Gaz, whose original idea is what it was to become strippers and who raises the money to rent the club, to ex-foreman Gerald, who has the skill to teach dancing and who therefore directs the group, to Dave, who takes on the public role as announcer at the final performance. All this adds up to a willingness to become communal subjects, to accept their incompleteness, interdependence, and connection across differences of differences of age, race, sexuality, body type, financial need, and social status. It also enables them to exploit their bodies in a jointly conceived communist class relation in which surplus will be communally produced and collectively distributed. What emerges is a videographic fantasy of a class relationship understood from the reparative perspective of potential and connection, rather than separateness, rip-off, and alienation. The bodily swerves are only momentary glimmers, however. How can such instances of enchantment lead to more sustained practices of communality and even to permanent escape from old forms of subjection? The film shows us the way. As Gerald equivocates, weighing his new job and social standing against the pleasure of the dance, the others gently encourage him. "Come on, Gerald. Yeah, you can do it, Gerald," they say. Illustrates the effectivity of what might be called the constructive outside, the potentiating force, not in this case of the body with a mind of its own, but of a becoming community with desires that call forth resolve and energetic enactment from the neophyte performers. The actual performance begins to take on reality from the energies of a community that forms around each of the participants to encourage him. It's almost as though the performance is a promise, an unreality to all of them until these moments of community are enacted. The women gathered around the men actively call forth new performances of masculinity, brazenly and tauntingly in the case of the women on the street, and with shy delight in the case of the rehearsal audience. Horse's mother, sisters, and niece Beryl. This reflection of pleasure gives the blokes a glimmer of the potential of the performance. The desire and anticipation of pleasure, the acceptance of the men's physically, just as they are, by the potential audience, all enact a performativity of the constitutive outside. New masculinities are elicited by the community, not simply by male agents of self-transformation. And masculinity is only one of the things being produced here. What's also being constituted in our admittedly specialized and interested view is a communal class relation, and one that would not have come into being without the community to encourage and foster it. The full Monty is, for us, about the potential for multiple productions, the making of masculinities released from the symbolic centrality of the erect phallus and manual labor, the creation of new forms of community energized by pleasure, fun, eroticism, and connection across all sorts of divides and differences, an experimentation with a communal class process in which interdependence and incompleteness are accepted as enabling aspects of individual subjectivity. These productions speak to us when we turn to thinking about how we might cultivate a politics of post-capitalist possibility. The affects associated with this becoming community are not those traditionally linked to left politics. The outrage and anger that cluster around heroic struggles, or the cynicism and righteousness that operate in left political movements as a powerful emotional undertow. Affect in the film has an enticing quality of wonder as awareness of and delight in otherness take hold of the characters. In this utopian atmosphere, distrust, misrecognition, and judgment are temporarily suspended, and a solidarity develops that is based not on sameness, but on a growing recognition that the other is what makes self possible, climaxing in the moment when the audience and performers come together and make possible both the performance and each other's roles within it. The audience is made up of men and women, wives and exes, relatives, neighbors, and police providing security, who are brought together by eroticized male bodies of a motley sort, and the sweet, hot promise of pleasure. Circulating during the performance is a mood of enchanted possibility, the possibility of an enduring relationship connection between Gaz and his boy, and even his ex-wife, between Dave and Jean, between Gerald, soon to be employed as a foreman again, and his former workmates, between the women of the audience who are now mostly employed, and the men who are mostly not. It seems that a new politics of class and community might draw on this positive affect, recognizing the co-implication of material existences as well as social identities, where the acknowledged interdependence of self and other is the basis of solidarity. To end this experiment in reading with an attitude of hope and an orientation to what is possible, we offer the full Monty. We ask you to join us in recognizing the glimmers of communal class subjectivity and in the glances and flows of energy between performances and audiences to see the enchanted solidarity of those who exist in recognition of their interdependency.